Okay, thank you. My name is Mariko Kubo. I am heading up the regulatory department of Leatherhead Food Research. I joined Leatherhead about 12 years ago as a Japanese-speaking advisor. And as I said, about 5 years ago, I became the head of regulatory of Leatherhead. And today I have Caroline Potter with me.
Yes, hi, I'm Caroline Potter and I'm VP Sustainability at Sagentia Innovation. Could you move on to the next slide, please? So just to give you some context, Sagentia Innovation is a sister company of Leatherhead Food Research, as mentioned by Daryl Thomas in his introduction. We provide science and technology-led advisory and product development services, taking you from strategy development and horizon scanning to technology evaluation and due diligence through to full product development, prototype creation and small-scale manufacturing, spanning consumer goods, industrial and medical sectors. And a key area of focus is the food and beverage sector, where we work closely with Leatherhead. Next slide, please. So we're talking sustainability. Sustainability is a vast topic. It can be broadly defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. As a society, we've become increasingly aware of the impact we're having on the planet, and the recent IPCC report highlighted that the time to take action is now. For the food and beverage sector, operating sustainably covers a range of different areas. So sustainable sourcing, that's considering the use of biosourced materials for packaging applications, plant-based ingredients as alternatives for food products, and upcycling of waste to produce usable ingredients. There's sustainable processes, capturing carbon dioxide produced by fermentation processes, using renewable energy sources, and reducing the amount of energy and water needed to achieve the same high-quality end result. And then there's also sustainable end use, whether that's reduced water and energy use when using a product, enabling reuse and refilling of packaging, or enabling sustainable disposal of packaging when it comes to end of life. Next slide, please. So there are many different drivers for increasing the sustainability of food and beverage packaging. Single-use plastic packaging in particular has had extensive media coverage about its negative effects on the environment. This has had an impact causing consumer concern and corresponding promises and pledges from companies and consortia. Surveys generally show that consumers are concerned about plastic packaging and generally view paper, compostable materials and glass more favourably. Mariko will go into more detail about the results of a recent Leatherhead survey on consumer perception of sustainable packaging. Next slide, please. So as I was mentioning in terms of pledges and consortia, there are numerous plastic pacts in different geographies, bringing together government, packaging manufacturers, waste management companies, brands and retailers, each focusing on the same 4 main areas with pledges to be achieved by 2025. These are 1, design for reusability and recyclability, ensuring that 100% of packaging can be recyclable, compostable or reusable. Area 2 covers responsible use, reducing problematic plastics, those that are hard to recycle, and generally using less material overall. The third area considers effective end of life. Packaging material should not just be technically recyclable or compostable, but should have a viable route to ensure that the desired endpoint, whether it's recycling or composting, can be actually achieved. In the UK, that goal is that 70% of packaging should have an effective end-of-life route. And the final area is the inclusion of post-consumer recycled content into packaging, thereby reducing the use of virgin plastic material. In the US Pact, this is extended to include the incorporation of responsibly sourced bio-derived content. Next slide, please. In achieving these aims, it is important to find solutions that meet all the requirements of the packaging required by the business, whilst also avoiding unintended consequences. And this is not easy. There are three main areas to consider. The functionality of the packaging. Essentially, does it protect the product, for example, with an effective moisture barrier, and can it be readily processed? The sustainability. This may be reducing the use of plastic, but wider considerations must also be taken into account, including the source of the material, whether it's renewable, and the overall carbon footprint. Regarding the end of life, there needs to be an assessment of the availability of the end of life route in the markets where the pack will be used, so that it's not merely technically recyclable, but recyclable in practice. And of course, there are economic or commercial criteria. Is the material available at scale, in the right location, and at a viable cost? This is the kind of evaluation Syngenta Innovation assists companies with. When packaging that meets the relevant criteria is developed and used, it's important to be able to communicate this on pack by making relevant claims. So I'll hand over to my colleague Mariko to talk about making sustainable packaging claims.
Thank you. As Caroline explained, the subject of sustainability is very broad, and therefore the number of regulation and policy involved in this subject are enormous as well. So today I can't cover the full subject of sustainability. We will cover specifically the environmental claims, the green made related to packaging. Before we go into details, I want to look at the sustainability claim term. Health and nutrition claims are defined in most regulations, whilst the term sustainability claim aren't defined in most regulations. But it is commonly understood in many national guidance, but also international guidance, that it is a claim, a statement, or a logo, or even color sometimes made towards the three pillars of sustainability. The first pillar is the social pillar. The social pillar, again, it's a very vaguely defined subject, but it comes down to treating employee fairly, being a good neighbor, and community members, both globally and locally. So claims related to that quite often is related to diversity. Claims related to this are more often seen on websites and social media than food packaging itself. The second pillar is the economic pillar. The economic pillar is related to compliance, proper governance, and risk management. Again, not often seen on food packaging. And the last pillar is the environmental pillar. This pillar gets the most attention from companies. Companies are focusing on reducing the carbon footprint, packaging waste, water regulation, and the overall impact on the environment. So these claims are not always related to packaging. It can also relate to the product itself, but we will look at the packaging green claims today. So these are claims such as plastic-free, 100% paper, made out of X% recycled material. Before we do that, I'd like you to introduce you to the survey. Jenny already explained to you we have done a survey. Within the survey, there was also a question related to the packaging material. Here's the outcome of the 8 countries we surveyed in. It's interesting to see the most interesting part of the consumer is the minimal packaging. I'm not covering claims today related to minimal packaging, but these are, for example, recently in the UK, you could see the retailer has removed the plastic around the multi-tints, or quite often you can see in the cleaning packets that you can buy a bigger refillable product, so avoiding buying smaller bottles itself. Then you can see that the biodegradable, compostable packaging and from 100% recycled packaging are most important to the consumer. It's interesting to see the 100% paper packaging is just over 20%. So I think it was 21% interest to the consumer. So that's really just shows how the consumer look at packaging and what they think it's important. Now, specifically moving on to making environmental claims, green claims. There is a lot of media covering the environmental claim and green claims. And it very often it is referred to that a lot of these claims are classified misleading. And there's a reason for that. Most of these claims are still regulated under the truthful and non-misleading clause, rather than having specific conditions you have to meet to make the claims. So if you compare looking at the nutrition claim, high in fiber, you need to meet a certain amount of fiber and you can make the claim. Such condition in most countries for most of the green claims still does not exist. So it means you need to consider the truthful and non-misleading claims. To consider the truthful and non-misleading claims within the packaging claims, there are several regulations you need to consider. The first one is food packaging, food contact material regulation. So the regulation which regulates the substances which can be put into food contact material and how to build the food contact material. The second regulation is packaging waste regulation. The packaging waste regulation is aimed to reduce the amount of packaging waste to go into landfill. It controls the amount of heavy metal used in packaging. It ensures packaging material is reused essentially. And sometimes it also regulates specific material criteria you need to meet to recycle a specific packaging material. What makes it most complicated is the local management system. Whilst you're making a packaging claim, you still need to look at the local waste managing system. And this is still very much local in the UK, but also globally. So just looking at my personal example, I have lived in the Surrey for over 10 years in 3 different towns. The 3 different towns, despite being in the same county, has a different waste management system. And this needs to be considered when making a packaging claim. There are several guidelines published in a national and internationally related to making environmental claims. These are not specifically for the food and beverage world, and they're also not specific for packaging itself. But if you compare these, they have all misleading. It all explains what the misleading cause is, and that is really globally the same. So here I have listed 3 examples, 1 guideline from Australia, 1 from Netherlands, and 1 draft guideline from the UK. There are 5 principles you really have to consider. Firstly, you need to make sure your claim is clear. It's understood to the consumer. Secondly, it needs to be fair. You cannot claim something which makes your competitor look worse than it is, or you can't claim something to make you look better than the rest of what is on the market. It needs to be honest and accurate. It needs to be very specific. So you need to provide the details of what you're claiming. And the last bit is you need to be able to substantiate it. These 5 principles seem simple to achieve, but if you really carefully think about it, it's not as simple as you hope for. So I have a few examples which we can consider whether it is misleading or not. So here is the first example. It is environmentally friendly claims or environmentally safe. I hope you can agree that these type of examples are considered misleading. They're not specific enough, so it doesn't explain why the packaging material is friendly to the environment or safe, But also, it is very difficult to say that it is accurate. Any packaging material, even if it is 100% compostable, have some diverse effect on the environment. So calling that safe or friendly would be misleading, in my opinion. If you insist or really wish to make a claim as such, I would suggest to substantiate it with a detailed statement. So this product is, or this packaging is environmentally friendly because it is 100% compostable or because it had 100% reused material. But as such, I would say it is the same as a general health claim. We are all familiar with the health claim regulation. Calling a product healthy without saying how the product healthy is also misleading. So for this claim, the same principle apply. Moving on to the next type of claim, what I call absolute claim, 100% paper, plastic-free, or 100% from recycled material. 100% paper, if you look at it from the food contact material regulation, I think technically quite difficult to achieve. Any paper packaging material will have other substances within it. So from that point of view, it isn't accurate and therefore also misleading. The plastic-free, if you look at it from a point of view that there are no plastic components in the product that is listed in a positive list of the food contact material, you may be able to achieve that. But I like you to think about the message you're providing to the consumer with the claim. Plastic-free, if it's written on the package, consumer will automatically assume, therefore, it is paper. And if it's paper, the consumer will also assume that you are able to recycle this product as paper. So if same with 100% paper and plastic free, both of them implies that these are paper recyclable. So if you look at the local waste management system and these products are not paper recyclable, I would classify them as misleading. Just because it is paper recyclable in one region of a country, it doesn't mean another region has the same facility to do that. So that's why I think initially I said the consideration of the local waste management system makes it difficult to make the claim. However, it is possible, like again, make a statement to see how this product can be recycled. 100% from recycled material. Again, if this is true and not misleading, I think that is fine. Many more countries are establishing voluntary system to certify your product. Again, I said the local recycling system is still very much local, but there are systems where you can apply to make it nationally understood. For example, if you look at paper recyclable, you need to look at the waste management. The waste management or guidelines give you criteria to make it paper recyclable. So the most important criteria is the minimum fiber content. So I have given you here different criteria in different countries. In Germany, for example, to call your product or to make it paper recyclable, you need to have a minimum of 95% fiber. Secondly, there can't be, generally speaking, any fatty food residues. So this is a good example, for example, in a pizza box, where the carbon box may be from paper, but generally speaking, the residue of the food does leak into the packaging, and that packaging no longer becomes recyclable. Therefore, it's common practice to have a laminated layer. In some countries, having a single laminated layer makes the packaging still paper recyclable. In other countries, not, In some countries, if you have a double laminated layers, it's no longer paper recyclable. And lastly, you have to look at the size of container. So again, by making these claims, you are implying that the consumer is able to waste the packaging in certain criteria. So you do need to consider these rules. As I said at the beginning, more and more countries are starting to have a harmonized guidelines or system where you can get your product certified. One of the well-known example is the German example. We all know the green dot. The green dot was established in the 1990s, and many consumer has been confused by this green dot. The consumer believe that when there is a green dot, the packaging material is recyclable. But we know that that's not what it means. What it means is that there has been a financial contribution to a qualified national packaging recovery organization, nothing related to recyclability. But the scheme has been expanded, and now in Germany, you can get your product qualified as recyclable and have a statement as such. This is an example in Germany, but in many other European countries, a similar scheme is being established. Now, looking at compostable claims. In a way, these are simpler because there are standards and regulation you need to meet to call your product home compostable or industrial compostable. That also means that calling your product, claiming that your product is compostable as such is misleading. It's not specific enough. So if you meet the criteria of home compostable and industrial compostable, you use the correct testing method, you could make these claims. And these are examples from the UK. Similar regulation standard exists for EU, US, Canada, Australia, and many other countries. But I like you to think about the local management system again. If a person doesn't have or doesn't compost at home and the product is labeled as home compostable, what should the consumer do with that packaging material? If the local authority collects compostable packaging, then fine, or compostable waste, then fine, we assume we're going to put it in there. But like where I live now, there is no collection for compost. So a product listed or declared as home compostable or industrial compostable, what do I do with such packaging material? Do I put it into the normal waste bin or do I put it into the recycling bin? So again, I think even when there are regulation, if you truly think about the consumer and want them to recycle it in the correct way, you may need to provide more information of what to do if there is no compost available. Many claims are also comparison claims. So these are either comparing to a general product on the market, or you may be comparing something against your previous version of the product. Make sure you have a wide range of similar products and make sure you keep up to date. The packaging world is moving very fast. So if you say you have 20% more recycled packaging material than the average packaging of a similar product, that may not be true in a very short period because everybody is changing the packaging. Also, if the regulation is changing quickly. If the regulation says that you need to have 30% recycled packaging material and you have 30% recycled packaging material, claiming that would mislead as well because it is not fair to the competitors. They all have the same material. So you do need to think about what is happening on the market and keep up to date. Lastly, in many guidelines, it does state that the comparison needs to be in percentage or an absolute value. So let's assume you had a 5% recycled packaging material and you change that now to 10%. You can't say 50% increased, which is true, but it is a misleading claim. You would have to say increased by 5% or total 10%. Using the percentage 50%, because there's a 50% increase, can mislead the consumer. Now a final point. In the UK guideline, alongside the 5 principles of non-misleading, the UK draft guidelines actually say that the claim must be considered in the full life cycle of the product. So what does that actually mean? Our example is where, let's use a yogurt pot as an example. You have a blue yogurt pot, you have created a new packaging which has 5% less plastic. You make the packaging green, which implies environmental friendly, and you also make a claim to say now with 5% less plastic, which is true in the sense. However, if you need, in order to achieve this, you may need more energy. You may need to change the facility. So the overall impact from a sustainability point has not changed. So that is then questionable if you should be making a claim that you have 5% less plastic when the overall impact of the product has no difference to the environment. A similar example exists where the product itself is an organic product and sustainable farming. So the claim says organic product with sustainable farming, but if you look at the packaging itself, the packaging is a non-recyclable plastic likely to end up in landfill. So is it really a fair claim to make about the product when the overall product is not sustainable because the packaging isn't? So I think that is also an important point you need to consider when making a sustainable claim. So my final thoughts are, I know I may not have been sounded positive about making claims, and I more pointed out about the complexity of making these claims, but I do support making these claims. As Caroline mentioned, there has been a lot of talk about the single-use plastic directive, especially in the EU. Within that, we all know the extended producer responsibility. One of the points within the extended producer responsibility is raising the public awareness. And I believe by labeling this and giving consumer information of how a product can be recycled or disposed of is indirectly contributing to your extended producer responsibility. So I do encourage you to make packaging claims, but I would make them educational to the consumer, of really educating them of how to dispose of the packaging material. And consider the 5 principles of non-misleading. We have a couple of, I have a couple of slides with references. You can go and see. These are just the EU one, and we have some international one and international guidelines. There are many more available. Most country has a guideline related to making sustainable claims. So I thank you, and we move on to questions.
Hi, Mariko. Mariko, and thank you very much for that. We'll take sort of one brief question, and what we're going to do is I'm going to close, but also we're having a 10-minute networking session as well. I think I just had one question. Hang on, let me just one question coming in here. Okay, can compostable packaging be accepted in curbside collection?
So yes, I think Mariko touched on that in her presentation. So it's, on the whole, no, compostable packaging isn't included in curbside collection. So that causes some issues when it comes to that sort of effective end-of-life route that a lot of the plastic pacts and pledges are concerned with. So that may be slowly changing, but at the moment, in most cases, it's not accepted.
Okay, I've got one final question here before we go to the network, and if you have any more questions, do go to the sustainability table. Would OPRL logos be considered as a claim? Is that something that we can answer, or is that something we'd like to take away?
As a general, I would expect it to be considered as a claim. Any type of logo are type of claims as well.
Okay. All right then. Well, thank you all for attending our webinar. There's been some very interesting discussions and debates. If we can be of further assistance, please do not hesitate to get in contact with us, either through legislation@leatherheadfood.com or through membership@leatherheadfood.com. Just a reminder, recordings of the webinar and the slides will be available on the members page, and that will be next week. And I just wanted to say thank you and goodbye, and that there will be, the networking session will close at 4 o'clock. However, the session, we have extended the session, so session till 4:30. So if you'd like to stay and network, please do. All right then. Thank you very much. Goodbye.